I didn't get a chance to meet the band until we actually got into rehearsals in Toronto, and that was a decision that was made by management because the band was on both coasts of the United States, and it made more sense for them to come to Toronto, meet halfway as it were, and it meant that I was in town all the time, so for rehearsals I could be there, and we had questions about the way tunes were progressing that we could, confer on that. And also it meant we didn't have to go traveling to go into pre-production. We could just sort of continue on from the writing phase and go straight into pre-production. So that worked out really well too. I didn't get a chance to meet the band until we got into the writing phase in Toronto, and we picked Toronto because it was kind of a halfway point between the coasts of North America, not literally, but so the band was split up into the two coasts, so it made sense to come to Toronto. Plus, once we moved out of the writing phase into the pre-production phase, we didn't really have to travel anywhere because we could stay in exactly the same setup and just move through that next process. Then it was just a question of moving from there to the studio to do the actual recording. So it made a lot of sense to work out of Toronto at the time. I didn't get to hear any of the demos from the band because we were trying to hook up sometime before Parallels, and it just didn't work out. Scheduling just didn't allow for it. So it wasn't until we got to making Parallels that we actually got to meet. And the demo process kind of got overlooked, and I got involved with the tunes while they were being written in Toronto, which made a lot more sense, in fact. I knew the band from listening to their previous records and liked what I heard, so there wasn't any decision-making that had to be made vis-a-vis demos. So it made sense to just go ahead with the project and get recording. The band were extremely receptive to changes. I had a talk with them prior to going into the pre-production stage, and it was like, if we need to make changes, let's just make them. Now's the time to do it, obviously, and let's do it while we're writing the tunes as well and getting all the rehearsals done. So they were very receptive to any changes. It's hard to remember what changes were made now, but there were subtle changes to choruses, and some time signature things were a little complex, too many parts maybe, and we'd make a few little edits here and there, but nothing too dramatic. Jim was very thorough with his writing process, and he'd sort of work those things through prior to coming into the rehearsal process. So we were good with that. After we'd finished pre-production, we went into Metalworks Studios to record. And I remember it being an interesting process. We had a lot of gear to set up, and Mark's drums were quite a challenge in themselves. He had a lot of drums and a lot of triggers, and we were running to click, and it was fairly complex, but he was well organized, so that really helped. And the process was a lot of fun. I always remember with Jim writing down and keeping a really close track on his guitar settings for different tunes, so that we knew if we had to go back and repair anything somewhere down the road, he could find those parts really easily, those sounds, and just plug them in, and we were ready to go. So it was a good process. The recording was a lot of fun. We worked hard. We worked 7 days a week. We worked from like noon until 2 in the morning, and short of having a dinner break, it was just that's what we were there for. And there wasn't too many distractions at Metalworks. It's in the middle of a concrete jungle, so we had work to do. When we got to the studio, we were well prepared. Let's remember, we'd been through the writing process, the pre-production process, all in Toronto, within a space of a couple of weeks, 3 weeks prior to going into the studio. So we were in good shape. So it was really a question of capturing the moment, as it were. We had all the arrangements together. We knew exactly where we were going with everything, and it was really a question of performance. And the guys were up for it, so it was a lot of fun. We had a ball doing it. I managed to leave enough time towards the end of the recording process to do vocals, because I really find it's hard on the vocalist when it's all crammed into a really short space of time at the end of the record. It's not fair on the artist, for starters, and it puts a lot of pressure on myself too. So I left lots of time, and we started vocals, you know, a good week and a half or so before we actually got to the point where we were done. Even so, it was still tight, and there were moments when we were, you know, wondering if we were actually going to get finished. But it was a lot of fun doing vocals with Ray. He put out big time for that record and sang extremely well. And the parts were pretty complex. A lot of harmony parts, background vocals. That you know, he was doing all the singing, so it was a lot of work for him. And he did a great job. I was very impressed with his performance during that period. I always remember one funny moment. It was really late in the sessions. I think probably the last night, about 3 o'clock in the morning. We were running late. He had one more little vocal piece to do, and we changed the lyrics. And he's one of those kinds of people who, once he's got something set in his head, it was really hard for him to change. And I wrote this one line in huge capital letters and stuck it on a music stand in front of him. And we must have gone through 30 takes, and every time he sang it wrong, and it was just, we were laughing so hard. It was a very funny moment.